Welcome to the Art of Overcoming here on WPFW 89.3 FM. I am your host, Aiyana, and I am so happy to be here. Today is the inaugural episode of the Art of Overcoming, and I cannot begin to express to everybody listening what you are in just what we have in store for you, what we have ready for you. I'm just so excited. Can y'all tell? Can you tell I'm excited? So let me just say this: wherever you are today, if you're listening in your car, if you're listening at the job, if you are listening online, wherever you are, I want you to lean in because this conversation is for you. So again, my name is Aiyana, and I want to just give a little bit of a breakdown because this is the very first episode of the Art of Overcoming here with Aiyana on WPFW. We are so excited because we are going to be talking about all things that have to do with overcoming, all things that have to do with personal development, with being real, with being your authentic self, with being able to own and acknowledge and really overcome your issues. And, you know, I say this all the time, and as I put out the information about today's show, I talked about this. This show is really all about promoting respecting your struggle. Yes, respecting your struggle and understanding that it's not our struggles that we should be trying to suppress and oppress and repress and push to the side, but we should be lifting them up and talking about them courageously so that we can take away the shame, discard the stigma, and get to the reality of who we really are, because it's those things that we struggle with that make us really, really special. So guys, you all are in for a treat today. Again, my name is Aiyana, and we today are going to be talking about mental health and wellness. That's what this show is all about, looking at our issues. So we're looking at all aspects and facets of mental health and wellness in the local DC community and in the community abroad. And so today I have some fabulous guests. Let me tell you something. Sometimes you're not exactly sure who you can pull to talk about what's been given to you, what you've conceptualized, and then it just is made so clear. And that's what happened today with these two guests, and I'm very, very, very happy to have them on. We're going to have on in this first segment a wonderful, wonderful person in the person of Melinda Hasbrook. Melinda Hasbrook is going to talk to us about her experiences with mental illness, as an advocate, as a survivor, as a provider. I mean, she is somebody who is the essence. I went to her website and I said she is the essence of keeping it 100 and just being all of who she is. And so I appreciate her for that. I'm very happy that she's with us. She is the principal consultant of Roy Has LLC, and she focuses on transforming systems into human experiences. She has also been a director, the former executive director of the consumer-focused activity center, Our Door. I'm sorry, is that right? Yes, Our Door Community Wellness Center. And so she has done a lot of work in the community, but I have her on today because I really wanted her to come and talk about her story, tell her story, and talk about what it's been like to walk around and be in the world as a consumer of mental health services who needs some help and some assistance, and also be an advocate at the same time. Melinda, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Hi
Thanks
there.
for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy you're here. Look, I didn't have you here, did This was orchestrated by something and someone else a little higher than us. So I'm happy that you're here. Melinda, first, just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll keep going from there, however you want to begin. But again, today, it's all about telling our story and being able to do that unashamedly so that we can release others to do the same.
No, absolutely. I tell people the most important thing for me is laughter, inspiring hope, keeping it real, and just using what you already have and pulling that out and understanding that you were given enough for what you need to do today. So for me, although I suffered from a mental illness and I stay in active recovery and have gotten to the point of resiliency, it doesn't just define me as who I am. So I'm in recovery from bipolar disorder and bulimia and suicidal ideation and post-traumatic stress disorder, but those are things that help communicate some of the things that go on in my life, but it's not about who I am every day and every moment of the day.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to pause you right there because I like how you started out. You said, you know, I've struggled with these things. You didn't use the word struggle. That's my word. I inserted that, right? But I've dealt with some of these things, bipolar disorder, bulimia, even struggling with suicide, ideations and that kind of thing. But you said, and this is important, that doesn't define me. That doesn't encapsulate me, and that doesn't completely represent me. Why is that important? I want you to talk a little bit about why that was important for you to kind of set out there off the cuff, right off the top.
It's important because too often we label people in very either stigma, judging attitudes, or just labels that can be dismissed. So as a Black woman, I'm familiar with what it's like to be just like, oh, she's a Black person, let's dismiss her. As a person with mental illness, if I say that, oh, she's bipolar, let's just disregard her, then you're able to you don't see the human behind that. And everybody is a human, so everybody deserves to be treated a certain way, like a human, like they would want to be treated. So we always say we're more than our diagnosis. And unfortunately, with mental illness, a lot of times people are spoken to about their diagnosis. So they'll dismiss people and say, oh, she's crazy, she's bipolar, she's schizophrenic, instead of saying she has schizophrenia and this is what she's struggling with today. But as a person, she's loving, or she's humorous, she's a mother, like the things that keep us all connected as humans.
Yeah, the things that keep us connected. And you know, before I even say what I'm going to say, if you're listening in and this is resonating with you right off the top, I want you to go ahead and call in to 202-588-0893. Again, 202-588-0893. We are talking about mental health and wellness. We're talking about some of the challenges around that, and why is it that we as people really try to capture people just with the label? You know, as a therapist and a clinician, I talk to folks all the time, especially persons in the African American community and people of color, and we struggle with this thing around mental illness. I'm good, I'm straight, I'm fine, I don't have you better go to pray and, you know, give it to God and everything is all right, you know, and we don't want to deal with that. And so a lot of times what I choose to say to people is, look, we have to utilize labels, so to speak, in order to be able to get a sense of what we're dealing with. You know, if we go and look in that book called the DSM, we have to be able to understand, like, what are the symptoms that somebody's experiencing, what is it that they're dealing with. But once we get that, some of that applies to you and some of it may not. Some of it will resonate with you and some of it does not. And you just have to figure out how do you navigate but not attach yourself onto the label. Because when you do that, just as you talked about, people want to put you in a nice little box of cray-cray. Can I just be real? Are you okay if I'm real today, Melinda?
Oh, please be real.
Okay. I mean, people just want to say, oh, she has bipolar, she's crazy. She's, you know, she got schizophrenia. Oh, right, and just put you in this little category. So again, if this is you, if you have a mental health diagnosis or you know someone and you want to get in on this conversation, call 202-588-0893. So we do have a caller already, Melinda, so we're going to go ahead and have our caller come on in. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
Oh, hi, yes. My name is Michael, and my comment is about bipolar disorder, which I have a sister that died at the age of 50. She died from lung cancer, but what I say she really died from was bipolar disorder because She went manic. She took off to Florida. She had curable cancer, but by the time she got back and we found her, it was too late. Now, what I'm gonna ask y'all to do is to stretch your mind to a dimension that it will never return from. Because I myself actually have bipolar, which is a blessing, and it's a gift. And the problem that we face here today is that because of big pharma and everybody wanting to put people on pharmaceutical psychotropic drugs, and because of the nutrients that are gone from our soil and from our water, there's a woman by the name of Aspen Morrow that wrote a book called Med-Free Bipolar. And what she did was, when she became bipolar at a young age, which most young men and women, you know, in their teens, they get it when they're struggling in high school and things start to get serious and then they go off. And with my sister, for example, when she went manic, because she was taken to the Psychiatric Institute of Washington and the psychiatrist put her on psychiatric medications right away, she never saw a psychologist. Nobody ever helped her find her real problems, which were cognitive and needed to be talked about. And so basically, she went in denial about her illness because she wasn't getting good health. And what she would do was, when she would become manic, she would stay up all night drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. Both of those are drugs that stimulate, that make you even more hyper. I'm going to say that there are presidents, inventors, artists, kings, many people in the world that have this thing that I don't call a disease. I call it a gift and a blessing, bipolar. If you channel it properly, then you can live and you can do things that other people can't. Because with that gift, we see things that other people can't see. And we can do things that other people can't do. And so I just encourage anybody that has that to not see it as a disease. Now, it can be a curse if you do what my sister did. If when you get some extra energy, the gift is having the extra energy and not knowing how to channel it.
Thank you, caller. Let me just let Melinda get in on this. I really appreciate what you've lifted up, and that's really helpful. Thank you for calling in and bringing that out. Melinda, tell me your thoughts when you hear our caller bring up this interesting point of view. He says, you know, he has bipolar disorder. He says that, you know, his sister also had it, and that he sees it as a gift, and it can be a curse, but it's all about how you channel it. So talk about that, this being a gift, and does that resonate for you?
It does, and I appreciate Michael being open about that and bringing up such a good question. For me, I see my history with mental illness as something that helped define what my purpose in life would be and what my passions would be. I knew I was good at a lot of things, but I wasn't passionate about them. And the hardest thing I ever had to do was survive having mental illness. Some people do fine without taking medicine. That's usually rare. But for me, I started taking medicine because my manias were too high and I was being hospitalized a lot. I wasn't in what we would call my right mind. But as time went on, the medicines changed. And as I could use more support, either in a community, I stay in active therapy. I've done really intense group therapy programs. So my needs changed. But that's a personal choice that people should make with the doctor involved about whether or not they should take medicine and how much to take. I don't see my bipolar disorder as, or any of my mental health disorders as a curse. They're just a part of who I am, just like I was born a girl. So that's just a part of who I am. And I've learned to cultivate what I do about them. So for me, speaking up about it and speaking out about it to attack the stigmas that are internal, that are in the family, in the community, in the church, everywhere. For me, my superpower was that I could speak up about it and speak out so that people don't feel alone so much. So a lot of the times that I've been public in different settings, including being the commencement speaker when I received my Master of Public Health, speaking about that because so many people say, oh, I've been going through that, or my family members have been going through that. and we don't look like the people that we see talked about it in the news or in movies and things like that. So for me, it was important not just for my minority community, but for people of every background and every culture.
Again, if you are listening and this is resonating with you, we're talking today about mental health and wellness, and specifically looking at the struggle that we have in the community as a whole, in the nation as a whole, with not taking people and putting them into little neat boxes of crazy. And understanding that people are diverse and that we have all kinds of facets to our personality and to who we are in the world. And so how do we combat this stigma? Oh, we talk about it. We talk about it, and we talk about it, and we talk about it. And that's what this show, The Art of Overcoming, is all about. So Melinda, tell me a little bit, and tell the listeners some of what you experienced when you were at some of your lowest places in life. If you can just think about your journey and just kind of what you were dealing with, with thoughts of suicide and the bulimia that you mentioned, as well as the bipolar. What was that like for you? What comes up for you when I ask you that?
For me, it started in my the illness phase started in my 20s. When I look back, I probably have always had bipolar disorder from a teenager on, but it was an enhancement more than it was an illness. So for me, I was able to work 5 jobs and go to school full time and do very well in school and in the community. But as time went on, as significant traumas started to happen, it started to knock stuff off the shelf for me, trauma-wise. But it also the part of me that is bipolar started to present itself in a sickness. So yeah.
And you said it was an enhancement.
It was an enhancement.
Say what you mean by that.
So for me, and even to this day, sometimes when I'm more hypomanic, but for me, it was easy to hold down multiple jobs, to attend, never miss class, to still be social, and it not impact me negatively.
Okay.
So, but when things start to impact you, like as a sickness, which means that it's interrupting what your daily functions are, that's when more attention is needed to it. And so for me, I was in law school at the time, and law school had nothing to do with the stress of it. It's just that was the place I was at when it happened. For some people, graduate school can be the stressor. But I started to have some memories of some traumatic abuse that had happened to me as a kid by a close member of our family, and I had knocked that off I didn't remember that. And so starting to remember things like that. And then my brother was injured in a shooting, and just my dad had gotten sicker. He has multiple sclerosis, and he had gotten sicker. So a lot of things were going on for me, and it basically triggered the phase of being bipolar. And you're not diagnosed right away with the things that maybe are your diagnosis. It's cultivated. So it's like as more information comes out, then your diagnosis might be changed. And I didn't know what to do, because all I had were stigmas in my head. Like
what? Tell me what you had.
For me, it was like you have to work harder, or you don't talk about stuff like this. You don't if you do this, you'll never have a job. What kind of relationship are you going to be in? Your family's, so those kind of things. And then I was receiving those messages because when I reached out for help from this very kind dean at my law school, luckily I was put into the counseling center with the director there, and he became my psychologist. But it was everyone was like, shh, you don't want to talk about this, because the bar, there was files that were kept separate because if the bar found out, it could affect my ability to practice law. And so when you're receiving messaging right away that something's wrong with you, and there's you're an outlier to the community, then you internalize those things. And who do you go to? So for me, I was living in an apartment, and I was just isolating, going further and further, and I lost reasons to live. Like, I didn't see why I would want to be alive, having to suffer through all this pain, and that's what just kept going.
And I really want folks to pay attention. I want you to pay attention. Again, if you're listening and you want to get in on this conversation, you can call 202-588-0893. Again, 202-588-0893. But I want you to stop wherever you are, and I want you to really lean in and listen, because there are people, Melinda, listening right now who are struggling, have been struggling for a minute, and they know that it's more than just a little something. They haven't reached out. They haven't gone anywhere. They've told somebody at church. They've maybe shared with a friend, and they're getting the very same messages that you talked about. This happens over and over and over again, and there are cultural norms that are established in all communities about what's okay and what's not okay. But I want folks to really, really pay attention to what Melinda just said. You know, you said I was talking to folks, and people were, you know, more than likely well-meaning and well-intentioned, and telling you, shh, be quiet. You may not want to tell folks. You're not going to be able to be successful. People are going to, you know, attach that to you. It's going to be in your file. I always say to people, people talk about all the time, it's going to be in your file. Like it's a big file in the sky that just follows us around on a cloud, you know, from place to place, you know, ready to drop on us. We hear that from the time we're in high school. It's in your file. And then you're at work. It's in your file. Like, let's just bring it down with the file. First of all, we have HIPAA, and we have some other things in place to protect us. But, you know, I just want to release some folks, and I think what you said is very freeing, that we have to get to this place where we're willing to take some risk. We're willing to take some risk and do what we need to do so we can get what we need to get, so we can be who we came to be. And I think that that's what you have done, because, you know, as you said, you are successful. You were in law school. You are doing things. Former executive director. You don't have to split off and either be, you know, in need and helpless and hurt, or successful and all of that. It's all of it. That's all of who we are. I am special. I tell people all the time, I got issues, and I'm doing a daggone thing. You understand? So it can be all of that. We have a caller who has called in. Caller, go right ahead with your comment or question.
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you. Yes. Come right on in. How are you? And go right ahead with your comment or question.
Yeah, I'm doing well. And I had a few years ago, but me myself, I'm bipolar.
Okay.
And it helped me when I had a traumatic situation in my life when I was a kid. But what it did was it gave me energy to push through what I was going through. I was able to, you know, use my secondary fantasy world to kind of, you know, I act like when I was asleep, I was awake, and when I was awake, I was asleep. So nothing really, it kept me pushing forward to what I knew I had to do. I had to finish school. I had to become an adult and be able to take care of myself. So I worked through that myself. But my wife, when I got married, my wife went through it, and we was involved in the church. So we went to the church, and the church, they prayed on us. And I was like, wait a minute, we've been doing this already. What kind of advice can you give us? And they like, no, it's in the Lord's hands. The Lord's going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a demon. So I kept, you know, it had got to the point so bad. My wife had heard she had diagnosed as manic, bipolar, and schizophrenic.
Okay.
And and I kept going around, and I ended up going to a nonprofit organization, and they was like, look, nobody's going to really want to give you direction. This you got to do. You got to go. You know, they started telling me what to do, and it was these private organizations that would help me, but the church, my insurance, nobody that was connected to me in the real world wanted to help me, but it was these nonprofit organizations that saying, hey, look, we've been dealing with this. The church don't really recognize it. They don't want to be bothered with it, you know, and insurance companies, they're going to pass it off. But by the time I finally got to the root of it and, you know, got her into a center and, you know, got her taken care of it, it destroyed our lives. You know, everything was ruined, you know, now. But my daughter, you know, thankful, my daughter just graduated from college in December. She had two full degrees in physics, computer science. But I think what happened was during all them years when I was looking about for a mom, I kind of, you know, didn't do as much or didn't pay as much attention as I should to her.
Got you. Thank you so much, caller. Thank you so much for that comment. Can you say a little bit? Caller is holding on. Just give us a second here. But Melinda, what do you have to say to what he lifted up? That he went to a lot of places. He went to church, and that he was not really given, in his words, the support that he was really looking for. He said, "Okay, we prayed already. So what specific advice can you give me in terms of how to deal with this?" What do you have to say about just the church and spirituality and kind of how that can intersect maybe in a healthy way, but then it's sometimes in a not so healthy way?
No, I hear that complaint a lot, and it's challenging because the church, not everybody's qualified to deliver every type of service. And so sometimes you're interacting with people that don't know to refer out or refer up. And unfortunately, there's been a big divide between the church and mental health recovery. And some of it has been that people have been, they've been hurt in the church. So some of it is that you have people who would never go back into a church because that's where they were most hurt. But I am encouraged about the way that churches have been taking on the lead to get involved in organizations and be connected in collaboration to put faith-based organizations back on the table of where you can access help. So for myself, I attend the Temple of Praise, and there's often our bishop will bring somebody up who tried to commit suicide or is thinking about suicide and ask for the whole church to pray over that person at that moment. But that person doesn't just then walk out the door without some resources or referrals or a setup for a plan. And I've often talked to people who've asked for help that way to help partner people with organizations, whether it be a private provider or a public provider like a lot of the nonprofits are. Unfortunately, you have to piecemeal your help. So it's not all going to come from one place. Even if you have the best organization helping you, private or publicly, it's probably not going to be the only thing that you utilize if you want to move forward and really reclaim what your new normal is, because your old normal kind of it fades away because that's just not who you are anymore. But not to say that now your life isn't fuller because you have a new normal. It's just that whatever is working best for you, whether it be spirituality, whether it be diet-based, exercise, medicine, things like that.
All right. Yeah. That's a very good point. Very good points you've made there. We have another caller who was called in. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Bernard, and I know what a lot of people are going through, struggling with mental illness and things like that. It's a lot of programs throughout the metropolitan Maryland, D.C., and Virginia area that a lot of people can get help, get doctors and things, social workers and stuff like that and things. And then there's this program that's called RAP that's over there on 4th Street Northeast where people can, get off alcohol and drugs, AA and NA. There's a lot of those programs going around in the D.C. area and things like that.
All right. Yes. Thank you, caller. Yes. So you're right. The resources a lot of times are unknown to people. Folks don't, really know what's out there. I have to say, as a clinician working in the D.C. metro area for some time now, there's a lot of resources in D.C., but a lot of times there's not the communication. There's not the communication that needs to be there so that people really know how to get hooked in. And just because it's there doesn't mean it's accessible. It doesn't mean people know what the pathways are to really get the help that they need. So today, before we are done, we definitely want to make sure that we lift up a couple of things that will be helpful for people going forward, because this is not just come and talk about some things. We are also going to give you some action items so that you can begin the process of getting the help perhaps that you need, or perhaps that someone in your community needs. We have a wonderful second guest that's going to come on in the next couple of minutes after we play the song of the day. Y'all do not want to leave the radio. Do not change your dial. She is dynamic. She is wonderful. She is amazing. And I haven't even known her that long, but as soon as I laid my eyes on her and I heard her talk, I said, wait a minute, she's got to come on the show. So just hold out. This is The Art of Overcoming with Aiyana, WPFW 89.3. We are back. We are back. I love that song. Yes, you gotta be. A lot of stuff we gotta do. And one thing that we really need to make sure that we're doing is keeping it 100, keeping it real, and being our most authentic selves. My name is Aiyana Ma'at, and you are listening to The Art of Overcoming here on 89.3 FM. Today is the first episode of this show, and this show is all about uncovering and recovering all that we're supposed to be by paying attention to what we need to overcome, looking at ourselves, acknowledging our frailties, and paying attention to our strengths so that we can be all that we need to be. So that's what this show is about, personal development, mental health, wellness, and paying attention to how we can grow. Today, we are really focusing on battling this stigma and paying attention to the ways in which we look at folks who have mental health challenges and how we kind of keep them boxed in. And let me tell you something. This is just my personal belief. We like to put folks in a box, but let me tell you something. If I went into a room and there were 20 people in the room and I said, I want to know who here has had or has a mental health challenge, please raise your hand. I expect every single person to raise their hand. Every single person. And so a part of what I want to make sure we explore on a continual basis here is the fact that we all have challenges in our mental health in some way, shape, or form. And that when we start to split people out and put people in little categories, then we really do ourselves a disservice, because as our first guest, Melinda, talked about, she talked about how folks like to do this labeling, and it keeps us disconnected. Then we don't understand the commonalities that we have, because everybody struggles in some way, in some shape, and in some form. And if you don't think that you do, well, that's a struggle in and of itself. Go see your local therapist. Thank you very much. All right, guys, we have a wonderful second guest coming on today. Her name is Jean Harris. She is so impressive. I sat in one of her trainings, and she was wonderful. I was very, very just captivated by all of the insight that she had, her transparency, and how poignantly she spoke about mental health challenges, and even some of her own personal experiences as a supporter of one who also struggled with mental health challenges. She is the president of the DC chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are so happy to have you, Jean Harris. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to start with having you talk a little bit about who you are. You are the president of the DC chapter of NAMI. And so talk a little bit about not just NAMI, I want you to do that as well, but also you, and kind of how your path has led you to the place where you find yourself now as the president, and what you're all about.
Okay. I came to NAMI DC over close to 35 years ago. And I came to NAMI DC because I personally needed support and help. I am a nurse and master's prepared, and I thought I knew a little about everything and something about health in general. But when this family member was diagnosed with schizophrenia, I realized that I knew very little in terms of my own self-being and how I could help that individual and the rest of the family. I knew what schizophrenia looked like from my textbook examples and from my clinical practice at St. Elizabeth when I was a nursing student. But that's only the beginning. The real point of what we need is how do we encourage, live with, support the individual with the illness, as well as maintain our own self-wellness. And that's one of the things I learned. So I was started there 35 years ago, and I've been there ever since. One of the things that I do on a regular basis is facilitate the Wednesday night support group, which is a group that is open to persons with lived experience and family members. And that's as broad as you want family members to be. Because in my mind, until we engage and support each other in this illness like we do others, the stigma remains. And we stigmatize ourselves.
Yes.
I tell this story a lot that when I first came to NAMI, mental health is not my background. My clinical background was med-surg and administration. And when I first came, I went to St. Elizabeth and hospitals and listened to psychologists and psychiatrists, and they were saying to people working on recovery, well, don't tell people about your illness. So we were building stigma into the process. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, why are we telling that to people? If you're telling an individual not to share it, you're putting shame. This must be something I cannot share. Like we were about tuberculosis, like we were about a lot of diseases. We were building in shame. And now what we're doing is trying to go back and undo the harm, which at that point individuals thought was a good thing, but it was not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen. It happened in the clinical areas. That was part of the mantra. Keep this quiet, keep it secret, because it'll affect your job, it'll affect your education. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So part of me and a part of NAMI is saying we need to break the stigma. We need to open up. We need to engage people, the person with lived experience, as well as family, friends, and professionals, to know that mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, and to engage people early in the treatment and processes of wellness and encourage them. Now, people still have a choice of whether or not they are willing or open enough to talk about their illness, but I encourage it. I encourage people to identify, self-identify. I can say the ones that I've known who've done that, I have not seen great harm come to them professionally or personally.
Oh, yes. I mean, look at Melinda here.
That's right.
Yes.
And I've seen a lot more Melindas. Melinda's is one of the choices I could have brought today. So I know that recovery is possible. I know with the right combination of therapists, medication, family support, and whatever support you can find in your community helps individuals to recover.
Yeah, that's good. If you are listening and you want to get in on this conversation, call 202-588-0893. Again, 202-588-0893. We are talking about mental health and wellness and the challenges around combating stigma. Jean, the thing that I see a lot of times that people don't pay attention to is that we know that this stigma exists in our communities, with family and with friends. We talked about sometimes even in the spiritual community, maybe more than sometimes, right? And people just are not informed and not educated. But, one of the things you just said, you talked about professionals, okay? And so professionals who actually have some education, some exposure, there's still this like built-in prejudice, this prejudging about who a person is or what they're, really able to do, how competent they are or are not because they have mental illness or mental health challenge. What are your thoughts about that? What do you think that's all about? I'm just curious.
I think it's about them not fully understanding, and that's where I'm going to plug NAMI, because that's when NAMI came into existence over 40 years ago for three main purposes: to educate, to support, and advocate on the behalf of individuals with mental illness, and to support families of those individuals. Because I think it's still, people are afraid of the diagnosis. And so what we do at NAMI is we attempt to educate, and we attempt to support, and we definitely attempt to advocate so that parities across the board for all illnesses, including mental illness, not there yet, but we're still pushing, that's a part of it, so it's not segregated or discriminated against, even in healthcare, because it's still seen as an illness that we don't talk about, we don't know about, or even when we do talk about it, we hear bad connotations.
Right. Yes, that's good. That's good. And so we have to just be real about that. And I love that you all are here to educate, support, and advocate. That's what it's all about. We have another caller who is called in, and as they put their question or comment forward, Jean or Melinda, either one of you are able to respond. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
Hi there. I am actually a recipient of mental health, treatment. I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD and bipolar disorder, and I married a fellow who wasn't diagnosed, and I just got really triggered by NAMI. We're unfortunately in divorce proceedings where he's used every vulnerable aspect of my mental illness against me, and even to the point where he got some sort of certification from NAMI to, elevate his position in our divorce. And so, like, I was completely forthcoming and even somewhat advocating for his treatment. Mm-hmm. And then he flipped. He's still undiagnosed, so quote unquote, he has the leverage in this matter. But I've had a lot of recovery, and I actually have a lot of faith and grace in my life, so I'm not too threatened by it, but I am furious. And my siblings, he's turned my siblings against me. It's a nightmare.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Thank you, caller, for calling in and sharing that. I mean, what she brings up is the fact that, we're talking about being more willing to talk about transparently, what the issues are, and to name it and to own it, and to not have the shame attached. And you can do that by just speaking out. But the reality is that you do risk isolation in some way. You do risk disconnect. You do risk some of what she's talked about, this kind of fallout. And I think that, oftentimes that's a part of the process. We can't paint the picture as if everything is all good all the time in every way, or that it's all bad. It's a mixed bag. And the reality is that if we want to be whole and we want to be well, that we've got to be willing to go through to get to the other side. And going through means we don't know always what it's going to look like. So I just really appreciate her calling in. Caller, I really appreciate you being transparent and sharing your story. We have another caller that has called in. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
How do you do today, lady?
Doing quite all right. Go right ahead.
Yes. I'd like to discuss the link. I don't hear this, haven't really read anything or heard it discussed anywhere, between such aspects as traumatic injury, physical illness, other kinds of situations that a person might experience, as opposed to biochemical disorder needing treatment, and that is a lot more difficult to pin down and to treat, as opposed to the ability to overcome those things, separate that or titrate that out and get the proper diagnosis, because there are a lot of people walking around who have been misdiagnosed as well. But when you talk about stigma, that tends to worsen the issue. So, again, hidden medical conditions as well could be added to that list, and not having those addressed, and being targeted by some people, like the lady that just called said her husband was targeting her. So, I mean, all these things come into play, and I don't hear them addressed or addressed as separate issues or as gestalt issues, that some of the parts being no greater than the whole. So, could you address that?
Yes, thank you, caller. Thank you so much. Melinda, you want to address that?
Sure. It's important as far as any kind of medical diagnosis that you are making sure that something else isn't present. So some people with a thyroid imbalance can present with symptoms of a mental illness, but once the thyroid is medically corrected, then those symptoms go away. So there are people, unfortunately, who have comorbidity of illnesses that don't necessarily play well together. So there are people with traumatic brain injuries or with epilepsy or seizure disorders that don't complement things like bipolar disorder very well. But it's very important that a medical professional is diagnosing, and that you have it from a competent medical professional. So it might be a neurological issue. It could be it could be a diabetes thing. There's a lot of stuff. So you want to make sure that everything is ruled out, because you're absolutely right. It could be something else present.
Excellent points. Excellent. We have another caller. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Ralph, and I just wanted to put a plug on what we're talking about. I have a lot of people in my family who has a significant mental health disorder, and especially things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, they will probably be in treatment for the rest of their life. That's the fact of life. But that's not what's going to make sure that they get to where they want to go. What they need is family members and friends who are compassionate and knowledgeable to actually to help them face their illness. The plug I wanted to make in the show is a program. I know we have it here in Northern Virginia. I think that's a training that is provided all over the nation. It's called Mental Health First Aid. That trains people on how to deal compassionately with somebody who are experiencing a serious mental health crisis. And they do not train the people to actually know how to diagnose and find out what is the specific illness. They're just training people on how to support somebody who is experiencing a crisis.
Thank you so much for that, caller. Thank you. And NAMI does that?
That is one of the things that NAMI does. We help families recognize what they're looking at, that it's not bad behavior, it's not somebody being obstinate, but that they may have a illness. And we have a family-to-family program that addresses that, a 12-week program. We also have our weekly support group that we do here in D.C., where family members as well as a person who with lived experience come together in one room and they talk about how to live together and how each other learns how to support each other in spite of the illness or whatever else is going on in the family. The other part, I'd like to go back to the young man that was called before this when he was talking about traumatic brain injuries. And we've heard that a lot. And you certainly can get that medically taken care of. But many times, even with that, that individual has to go on some form of medication because the injury to the brain is just like an injury to the arm or injury to the heart. You need medication or some kind of intervention. And it may not necessarily be a mental illness, but there will be some distortion in thought, actions, and behavior because the brain has an injury to it. So, and I know lots of times we want to separate that out, and that's fine, but the treatment sometimes is very similar. You know, whatever name you want to give it, the treatment is very similar, and the behavior and cognitive therapy is very similar because there's been an insult to the brain, whether it was biochemical or whether somebody hit you over the head with a baseball bat. The symptoms will be very similar, and the behavior will be very similar.
Okay, so I just want to again thank you both for coming on today. I'm getting ready to give my final word in the next 30 seconds, but I want to hear from you in terms of how can you give the telephone number and the website for how people can get in touch with NAMI?
Yes, absolutely. NAMI is located at 422 8th Street Southeast. That's our office.
Okay.
Our telephone number is 202-546-0646. That's our office. I'm going to put out two other plugs if I have enough time. Next Saturday and Sunday, NAMI DC will be at the NBC Expo at the Convention Center. Want to see all folks there. We will have tables set up. We will be doing 3 presentations on Saturday and Sunday, talking about mental health from different perspectives. In fact, Belinda is one of the presenters at that event on Sunday, and we have 2 others. We also have other programs available in the D.C. area.
And I know you can visit namidc.org. Yes. All right. So if you were listening today, I want you to understand here just one thing. This is the bottom line. This is my final word for today. And what I want you to know is this: whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're going through, this is what all human beings deal with. So we've got to stop making that something that's super special because you have a challenge and it's a mental health challenge. And we have to understand that when we can speak it out, we can own it, and then we can use it to build up our strengths. We not only transform ourselves, but we transform our communities. This has been a fabulous show. I want you to tune in every Monday at 1 o'clock so that you can hear the Art of Overcoming as we continue to move forward and push ourselves to the next level in our lives. Thank you for listening. This is Aiyana with the Art of Overcoming, WPFW 89.3. See you next week.
Good afternoon. These are the headlines. I'm Gloria Minot. Trade wars generate no medals, monuments, or military parades. But they do tend to leave a lot of economic wreckage, often hurt the very people they're meant to help, and can fracture diplomatic relations among allies. After announcing plans last week to slap taxes on imported aluminum and steel, President Donald Trump called trade wars good and breezily forecast an easy victory for the United States. Economists see it rather differently. Starting a fight with trading partners has mostly proved to be self-defeating, they note. Usually all sides lose in a trade war, says Douglas Irwin, a Dartmouth College economist and author of the just-published Clashing Over Commerce, A History of U.S. Trade Policy. He said trade shrinks as countries pile on barriers in an effort to remedy some grievance, with consumers paying the price. Wall Street clearly agrees. Stocks sank Thursday and Friday after Trump announced plan to slap tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum imports, effectively threatening to wage commercial war on U.S. trading partners from Brasilia to Berlin to Beijing. Shares of some America's biggest exporters, Boeing, Deere, Caterpillar, fell hardest, fearing that other countries would retaliate against U.S. projects. Italian voters have flocked to anti-establishment Eurosceptic parties and rejected mainstream traditional political parties, the latest predictions from the country's election indicated today. The populist Five-Star Movement, founded by stand-up comedian Pepe Grillo as a bombastic challenge to the established order, emerged as the big winner of the general election in a result that will be viewed with trepidation in Brussels. With around half of the ballot counted, it looks as though the Five-Star Movement had won around a third of votes, up from 25% in Italy's last general election in 2013. Police are searching for two men who they say used an ATM skimmer and fake ATM cards to make off with cash. Police said this morning the men, who appeared to be in their 20s and 30s, are accused of taking money from ATMs over the past month on Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in Southeast, Georgia Avenue Northwest, and a location near the Benin Road Metro Station. Photos from a surveillance camera showed two men wearing baseball caps and puffy jackets. One man wears oversized glasses. Police say the men planted a skimmer on an ATM in the 1800 block of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in Southeast and later returned to withdraw money using fraudulent ATM cards. They're also accused of withdrawing money using fake ATM cards on the 100 block of 45th Street in Northeast and on the 4800 block of Georgia Avenue in Northwest. Police said the offenses occurred between February 2nd and March 3rd. ATM skimmer devices allow criminals to steal your financial data and your money. Anyone who has information on the crimes is asked to call police at 202-727-9099. That's 202-727-9099. A reward of $1,000 is offered. Thousands of people in Northern Virginia still don't have power days after strong winds ripped through the region and brought down trees and power lines. As of 9:30 a.m. today, more than 17,000 Dominion Energy customers in Northern Virginia didn't have power, the majority being in Fairfax County. Some Dominion Energy customers may not see their lights turn on until 11 p.m. Tuesday, when the utility expects restoration efforts to be finished. Fairfax County Public Schools said Sunday night the power outages are still affecting 7 schools, and those schools are closed today. Prince William County Public Schools said power had been restored to all its schools, but the schools would open 2 hours late today. All Fauquier County Public Schools opened 2 hours late as well. Pepco said Sunday night it had restored power to 95% of its customers. As of 8 a.m. today, a little over 2,000 people remain without power. Fierce winds up to 60 to 70 miles an hour wreaked havoc on the region Friday, and 3 people died in Maryland and Virginia, including a 6-year-old boy. A larger-than-life statue now honors D.C. Mayor for Life Marion Barry. The 8-foot-high statue outside the Wilson Building on Pennsylvania Avenue was unveiled in a ceremony Saturday. Sometime after Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, and before President Obama gave us hope, it was Marion Barry that gave opportunity to Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser said at the ceremony. When many Americans think of Barry, they think only of disgrace and public scandal. He dominated a generation of Washington politics and is adored by many as a champion of